Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at an interesting quote here. It stirred up a lot of online discussion. A lot of people have been taking this kind of negatively because to most people when Pokimane says this, it just kind of comes off as like kind of coping about the fact that apparently streaming is quote-unquote male-dominated. Now, it's actually kind of funny because, I mean, I think this is a conclusion anyone could come to, the fact that streaming and like Twitch or whatever are apparently male-dominated platforms, and this is probably the most obvious thing you could point out. So when it even is really pointed out, since it's such an obvious fact of nature that really doesn't actually affect anything, it just comes across as like you being salty about it, or you're kind of just upset about it for whatever reason. So like I said, a lot of the takes on this one have been pretty negative from a lot of people. So Pokimane claims that streaming has become, in the last few years, a lot more male-dominated. I guess her two big examples of how males have apparently dominated streaming are Kai Cenat and iShowSpeed, who granted are probably the two biggest streamers in the entire game right now, like at least that I can think of. Maybe there's like a Spanish streamer or something like that, or a VTuber that I'm not aware of that's just blowing their numbers out of the water, but I don't think that's the case. But I think it's an interesting discussion to have nonetheless, because this is something that if you look at it on the surface level, if you're one of these people who thinks that there has to be like equal representation in everything, right? You would look at this and be like, oh, well, this industry is way too dominated by males. We need more women in streaming and stuff like that. But I think to anybody really, you understand that that's just not ever going to be the reality probably of the situation. I really never see a world in which like there's the same amount of women to men playing video games, live streaming gaming on the internet, things like that. And the reality is just that these kinds of hobbies typically appeal more to males, especially younger males, than it does to their female counterparts. But before we go ahead and get further in the video, I do want to say if you're brand new around here on the channel, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below so you don't miss any more of my uploads in the future. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video. Pokimane, still the most followed female streamer on Twitch, has claimed that the streaming world has become increasingly male-dominated in the past couple of years, pointing to the success of Kai Cenat and iShowSpeed. Kai Cenat has quickly risen from a popular but niche streamer in 2021 to a bona fide superstar, striking ad deals with McDonald's and featuring A-list celebrities on his Twitch channel. And iShowSpeed is arguably the most popular streamer globally right now, traveling the world and attracting massive crowds in every city he visits. On the Colin and Samir podcast, Pokimane was asked about the rise of Kai and Speed and explained that while she loves their content and everything they do, she believes their success is indicative of the increasingly, quote, male-dominated demographic of viewers. Quote, as much as I think Kai and Speed are incredible and what they do is incredible, also when I think of them, I think of how much the audience has changed over the years as well. Quote, they're both like two young dudes who do like crazy wild things, and just from a data and analytics perspective, I find it really interesting to see who are the top streamers, their similarities, their differences, especially in terms of audiences, and unfortunately, there aren't that many huge female streamers, at least not on Kai and Speed's level. So I find this really interesting to claim that like from a quote-unquote analytical and a data-driven perspective, right, that you would find this interesting, because even like one Google search of just like looking up, for instance, the Twitch gender viewer demographics, you'll notice that over time, they have actually shifted more and more female. So this concept that like as a whole genre or whatever, streaming is just becoming more and more male dominated, it's not backed up by really any data whatsoever. Now, the quote unquote evidence that they're gonna use here is just like circumstantial shit that can be explained like a million different ways. It's not in any way really indicative that apparently streaming is too male dominated, or it's just something that like, oh, there's not that many huge female streamers out there, right? Now, like I said, there's probably always going to be more of a balance towards men in these kinds of industries because, like I said, a lot of this, it starts off early. You know, your careers start early. My career started when I was a child on YouTube. So for a lot of young boys, they just grow up caring more about video games and like doing YouTube and stuff than girls have. It's not like a knock on women or anything. It's just the reality of the situation. So it makes sense that there is more representation of males in general in this kind of industry. And it's really not even a bad thing that there's no major female superstars, because to me, and I assume so many other people, it's really not about your gender. Like, I don't really give a fuck if you're male or female. If you're talented at your job, which in this instance would be like streaming or content creation, you will find a way to rise to the top. Because that's what people who are good at content creation and streaming do. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, that inherent like driven instinct to continue and like work hard and succeed, it just exists in only certain people regardless of that immutable characteristic or whatever. And there are a lot of like really huge female streamers out there. Pokimane is a really good example of it. So like I said, she uses these two examples of Kai and Speed especially to be like, oh, this is how it's gotten and shifted more and more toward a male demographic. But it really has nothing to do with like male versus female anything. It has to do everything with the content strategy that Kai Cenat and IShowSpeed have. First and foremost, both of them are highly charismatic, meaning that when people tune into their stream, they're always talking about something, they're talking to someone, they're always playing something, there's almost always something going on their streams. Not only that, but they're constantly hanging out with celebrities. You got IShowSpeed out here hanging out with fucking soccer superstars. You've got Kai Cenat on stream with like a different platinum rapper every week. He went to like the Grammys and was meeting rappers like backstage and shit. It all comes down to content strategy. I mean, I don't really think people are like, for instance, tuning into like a Kai Cenat stream or an IShowSpeed stream simply because they're men or whatever, right? It's because what they're doing on their streams is entertaining, it's drawing people in, their friends talk about how much they like these people's streams. And obviously, I think Pokimane knows all of this. She's very good at her job too. She's one of the biggest streamers. But it's just kind of an unnecessary point to make, to be like, oh, well, this is a male-dominated thing. And when you say that it's becoming more and more that way, that's just not true. There's no truth to that whatsoever. There's no analytical or like data-driven perspective that says that. It's really just like an anecdotal thing where I feel like it's more based on just vibes or whatever, but even then, I don't really understand how you could get that vibe when you've seen some of the shit that's been happening on Twitch over the last few years. But, quote, nowadays the audience, like, in a way, gone more to being a lot of, like, younger dudes, which is amazing, but I remember during 2020, I felt a much larger female presence, both in the audience and in regards to the streamers we were seeing growing and becoming more popular. Quote, who you see at the top can also, a lot of the time, reflect the viewers, the streamer said. When asked by Colin if she believes the internet in general is more male-dominated now, she said streaming certainly is. Pokey explained, quote, the streaming landscape, let's say 7 years ago, very male-dominated. It was the most even during 2020, and since then, it's gone back to being more male-dominated. Whether this is because of Kai and Speed's popularity or that they've just benefited from the change, Pokimane didn't say. In the top 20 most followed streamers on Twitch, Pokimane is the only woman. In 2024, no female streamer was in the top 40 most watched channels on Twitch, with Iron Mouse being the highest at 44th overall. 3 female streamers, Iron Mouse, Mira, and Emiru, made the top 100 most watched channels in 2024 via Sully Gnome. However, in 2020 and 2021, only 1 female streamer made the top 100 most watched each year on Twitch. In 2020, Pokimane was 63rd most watched overall, and in 2021, Amaranth was the only woman in the top 100 at 42nd. Now, there's an obvious issue with a lot of female streamers that has been entirely ignored in this debate, and I know this is going to upset some people because there's a lot of people who, anytime you criticize this kind of shit, they get upset and they think that you're just being sexist, but it's just the reality. The last like 2 or 3 years on Twitch, the vast majority of major female streams that were like actually getting shown on the homepage and shit were women abusing the hot tub meta and shit like that. So Twitch, a website where people go to watch video games and to watch like people have conversations with the audience, things like that. The entire homepage at one point was literally full of just random women who were sitting in a bikini in, you know, a hot tub or something somewhere, barely circumventing the TOS of the website, and almost all of them exclusively were promoting an OnlyFans page where some of them showed even more, and some of them, you know, they just showed their bikini shots or whatever, right? So I'm not saying all female streamers did this, because obviously there's outliers and there's women who were just playing games or whatever, right? But how many of the female streamers that, you know, were making headlines over the last couple years were not abusing these metas, were not, you know, filming themselves doing this shit? I mean, Amaranth, for example, was doing this constantly, and then she went through the whole thing where she acted that like her like husband or whatever was making her do it. And that's just like what kind of stigma got set towards a lot of female streamers, because the platform was literally just promoting the shit and shoving it down everybody's throats. And I think that's why she says like, oh, it felt like there was more women in the last few years and now it's becoming more male dominated, because all of a sudden, after all of the backlash for people who are trying to watch video games coming to Twitch and seeing softcore porn, the website started finally cracking down on this shit and sending these people back to, you know, OnlyFans and wherever they came from with that shit. And then now, yeah, a lot more of the homepage and whatnot is finally taken back up by people playing video games and doing shit like that, which is the way that it should be. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. No one is going to Twitch for that shit except for like OnlyFans brained zombies who were tuning in literally just to like buy OnlyFans content and like support these women. But even through that, the viewership, in like the terms of the female viewership, has been increasing over time on Twitch, to the point now where it is almost getting to like a 60-40 male to female split. It's like 65-35 male to female right now, at least during like 2019 to now. So it's just a ridiculous thing even anyway, because when you just look at everything being done, a lot of the like popular female streamers are people actually now doing talented shit, or like, for instance, there's a bunch of female VTubers who do like the animated characters and whatnot on the screen. A lot of them are pulling fucking absurd numbers, and just because like, oh, they're not in the top 40 most followed or the top 66 most watched of the year, right? These are almost meaningless metrics that don't actually describe anything. It's just always going to be full of the top streamers, and it really doesn't matter if they're male or female or not. To the average viewer, that's just an afterthought. Who really gives a shit, right? People just want to see people on Twitch playing games, having fun, and usually, you know, you can go there and find that. It really shouldn't matter either way who it is. But I just thought it was an interesting discussion anyway, because when you look at like Kai Cenat and IShowSpeed, they're just doing something that stands out from everybody else in streaming anyway. Like, there's very few people, male or female, who could ever have the drive to create as much content at the quality that these two are actually producing content. You know, they're doing like professional grade streams with like stream houses and fucking, you know, like I said, meeting up with celebrities and whatnot. There is probably a handful of people in the entire world who could do that. And ironically enough, Pokimane is big enough, she is rich enough, she is successful enough that if she wanted to try and match what these guys are doing with their streams, she absolutely could. And yet she doesn't. She chooses not to for whatever reason, and that's fine. But ultimately, using these two anomalies as like an example to back up a point that's not really backed by any sort of data or anything, it just doesn't really make sense. And honestly, it's a conversation that just serves to divide. Like, nobody wants to sit here and hear this shit because it's such a pointless thing to like really care about. Like, as a man, I don't sit here and think like, well, I hope that more of the top 100 YouTubers are men. That represents me. Like, there's no reason to feel that way, for me at least. And so I don't understand why anyone else would feel that way. You should feel most represented by yourself and how you impact the ecosystem of content around yourself. That's the whole point, I think, of doing shit like this. Not sitting around wondering about meaningless, really, metrics that just kind of plainly describe the reality around you as the way it's always been, in a way that just kind of seems salty and like seems more to divide than anything. So anyway, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. Thank you to my Watch Optimus subscribers. Your support helps the channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, talking about the gender gap in streaming and signing out.